You know, really, the book of Enoch really isn't scripture, and we're not supposed to have anything to do with that. He didn't correct them. He didn't correct the entire early church had within their cosmology the understanding of what was in the book of Enoch. In fact, there are academic circles today. I've got a academic book. It's about $65 that deals, because when you start getting in academic books, they really go through the roof. You can't get them for $19.95. But we have scholars from all over the world looking at the intertextual ability of the book of Enoch with the entire New Testament and how it formed a lot of their cosmology and their understanding. And so ground warfare is dealing with demonic influence at ground level. When we start dealing with what the Apostle Paul is talking about here, he's talking about second heaven entities, the generals that serve under Lucifer. And they don't possess people. They move continents. They move nations. They control nations. They control the culture of nations. Now look at when he was sitting here, the Apostle Paul did not write this sitting back in Cleveland, Tennessee, or Springfield, Missouri. He wrote it in the ancient world, New Testament times, where all the nations except for Israel were pagan. They were under the influence of principalities and powers that created the very cultures that they were required to go out and to preach the gospel to. Now, it's coming pretty close in America, being that same way again that King Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. There isn't. The closer we get to the end, the more it looks like the beginning in many ways. And so we're wrestling with all the influence and all these different things that are going on around us. When people read this, they talk about, well, after church, I went out and had a flat tire, so I need to go put on the armor of God because I'm under spiritual attack. No, most Christians that say that don't even know what spiritual attack is. Because we don't understand the dynamic, it can absolutely render me and my saltiness null and void. Activists know this. I can't remember what show I was on. If it was one Mary and I did, I've done like 4 this week. But one of the things that an activist, and I mean there's some wild crazy activists in America, okay? We see them all the time on the news and everything. They don't care what people say about them or the culture says about them. They're there to change the culture. That was the original job of the church. We are here to be salt and light, and to be salt and life, we have to affect the culture. And there's no neutral zone, guys. There's no neutrality in this. Either we're affecting the culture, or the culture is affecting us. And if the culture is affecting us, we are allowing this wrestling to be won by principalities and powers. We need to quit worrying what the world thinks about us. But I want to go and I want to kind of expand your understanding. I want to go to Deuteronomy 32, verses 7 through 9, and this is out of the English Standard Version. Deuteronomy 32 is one of the few places in the Torah that with some of the ancient scriptures and ancient versions, there is a variation in the reading. And actually, I believe, and Dr. Michael Heiser, the author of The Unseen Realm, believes that this is a more accurate translation and also agrees with the Septuagint. Now, Moses is reminding them of some things, okay? The Deuteronomy is a very unique book. The first 4, Moses did not write as far as like how I would write a book, even, he was not inspired by God to write it. God met him face to face and said, take notes. Moses was literally God's secretary. In Deuteronomy, as this new generation that had grown up during the wandering in the 40 years in the wilderness, they had grown up, their parents rejected going across the Jordan. This new generation was going to go across, and therefore Moses creates a Reader's Digest version of the first 4 books, so that he can give them a rehash or condense the most important parts that they're going to have to keep in mind as they cross over the Jordan. And so it's called Devarim, words. He spoke the words, a narrative, a Reader's Digest version of it. Now listen to this out of the ESV version. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Now this is where the variation is. With the King James says the sons of Israel. Israel didn't exist. We're talking Tower of Babel. Okay? But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. And Dr. Michael Heiser does an outstanding job in his book on the unseen realm of explaining this and the logic behind it. At the Tower of Babel, and I deal with this in my second book, that principalities and powers, when Nimrod changed to become a Gibborim, it allowed him to see higher spatial dimensions and a lot of other things. And he began to get in league with these principalities and powers, and we have learned to control their power. That's what facilitated the apotheosis of George Washington, where he's literally sitting on the throne of Zeus. There's a lot more to this, guys, than we realize. In fact, when Jesus, remember when he was preaching and he said, I see Satan falling as lightning? What was the symbol for Zeus? Lightning bolt. And we can go back to the Tower of Babel and all that. He has many different names, but for over 1,000 years, the worship of Zeus, which later with the Romans became Jupiter, reigned supreme in the nations until Jesus. When his guys went out and began to faithfully preach the gospel, and then later on we have the day of Pentecost, then we have the Gentiles begin coming in, and we have Paul going out. Every soul that was saved and brought into the kingdom was dethroning Zeus as superior in the earth. Although I think he's making a comeback because the old gods are returning. I have had reports from men that are either in the Pentagon or have children that are serving in the Pentagon, that at the highest level and their deep state members are walking the halls of Pentagon announcing the old gods are returning. We can't wait for them to return. Jesus dethroned them. The preaching of the gospel dethroned them. Okay, now I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but this is fun. How do we destabilize the power of a principality in the area? The true gospel. The more hearts in an area that are won to Christ, the less people that he has to influence. Have I lost you so far? Are you still with me? Okay. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 10. This is when the story of Daniel had to fast for 40 days to get an answer. And this messenger shares several things with him that are very, very important that we can miss if we're not paying attention. Starting in verse 13. Now he's telling Daniel why he was late coming, because the moment that Daniel began to fast and pray and to know the truth, that messenger was sent from the throne of God. Yet it took him 40 days to get there. How many know the travel from the third heaven to the first heaven to appear to Daniel should have been instantaneous? 40 days. But he says this, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 1 and 20 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. And so he was fighting one-on-one for 21 days. Michael came, and all of a sudden more kings showed up, and so the conflict lasted longer. It took an entire 40 days to get there. Now, he's not talking about the king of the Medes and the Persians were out on horses, and they were battling this angel from showing up. How many know that would have been a quick battle? We have stories of when Israel was surrounded by its enemies. and the king was mocking the God of Israel. One angel was dispatched. Was it 180,000 or something like that one night? I tell you what, it doesn't take long to send them on to their reward. But an angel-to-angel war. There was a principality over the Medes and the Persians that also had support. Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and I think the spiritual wickedness in heavenly places is not an entity, it's the iniquity force that they derive their power from their entire kingdom from. But you have different princes. There is a hierarchy to Satan's kingdom, just like there is to God's kingdom. And these members of the divine council, when they fell, they maintained their rank, just in a different kingdom. Okay? And so an angel was dispatched, but he had to go one-on-one with the principality that was controlling Babylon at that time. Okay? Now let's jump to verse 20. Now look at this, because not only are the principalities warring against God, they can war against one another for strategic areas. Then said he, Knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee, and now I will return to the fight with the king of Persia, and when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. Who's that? The principality that was behind the entire Greek culture on the back of Alexander the Great that came in to displace. So there can be a displacing of the authority of principalities and powers. They can war for people groups. Now, a long time ago, I got several things I want to deal here and bring back to God. I need to make sure that I do it. A long time ago, when the Pilgrims first came to America, they announced that Yahweh was going to be the God of this continent, and that the law of Moses was going to be the law of the land. But then we have Freemasons that came in that literally utilized the great revivals of Jonathan Edwards and everything else to establish something called a republic. A republic is not a democracy. Democracies will always absolutely crumble. A republic will last as long as the people remain moral. In fact, George Washington even warned us of that. He said, we are a moral, religious people in his final speech, and said, as long as we be that way, we can have it. In fact, one of the founding fathers says, here's a republic, hope you can keep it. Because the morality was there. But what they did, the Freemasons established Baal as the primary principality over the United States of America. Now I want you to put this with modern news, okay? Brother Benefield down in Oklahoma City here about 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was, began this movement of it's time for Christians to divorce Baal. And he literally created a legal prayer that was like a legal document that we could present before the throne of heaven and say, you know what, we're not married to you, we're marrying Jesus, and we were asking heaven to give us a writing of divorce. Okay? So then he gathers representatives, believers from all 50 states. They gathered in Washington, D.C. at the same time, and as representatives from all 50 states, they divorced Baal over America. And within a few days, there was an earthquake that cracked the Washington Monument. You think I was making a point? Okay? Since then, everything the deep state has tried to do